Tynan Portillo presents, featuring the best horror stories of the 19th century. Welcome to the Poe Show podcast. Narrated by Tynan Portillo. Today's episode, The City in the Sea, by Edgar Allan Poe. Lo, death has reared himself a throne in a strange city lying alone far down within the dim west, where the good and the bad and the worst and the best have gone to their eternal rest. There, shrines and palaces and towers, time-eaten towers that tremble not, resemble nothing that is ours. Around, by lifting winds forgot, resignedly beneath the sky the melancholy waters lie. No rays from the holy heaven come down on the long night time of that town. But light from out the lurid sea streams up the turrets, silently, gleams up the pinnacles far and free, up domes, up spires, up kingly halls, up fanes, up Babylon-like walls, up shadowy long-forgotten bowers of sculptured ivy and stone flowers, up many and many a marvelous shrine whose wreathed friezes intertwine the viol, the violet, and the vine. Resignedly beneath the sky the melancholy waters lie. So blend the turrets and shadows there that all seem pendulous in air, while from a proud tower in the town, death looks gigantically down. There open fanes and gaping graves yawn level with the luminous waves. But not the riches there that lie in each idol's diamond eye, not the gaily jeweled dead tempt the waters from their bed, for no ripples curl, alas, along that wilderness of glass. No swelling tell that winds may be upon some far-off happier sea. No heavings hint that winds have been on seas less hideously serene. But, lo, a stir is in the air. The wave, there is a movement there, as if the towers had thrown aside in slightly sinking the dull tide, as if their tops had feebly given a void within the filmy heaven. The waves have now a redder glow. The hours are breathing faint and low, and when amid no earthly moans, down, down that town shall settle hence, hell, rising from 1,000 thrones, shall do it reverence. Hello from the Poe Show. I'm your host, Tynan Portillo. If you enjoy classic poetry, short stories, ghost stories, and gothic tales, then subscribe to this podcast, give it a good rating, and like and share the episode with your friends and family. Whoever you want to, honestly. It always helps. Before we get into the after talk, we've got a fan mail message I'd love to mention. And if you'd like to message the podcast, you can send an anonymous text message using the link in the description or email poshowpod@gmail.com. Anyway, we have one message here that says, I've been listening to your podcast and I'm really enjoying it. Have you thought about narrating The King in Yellow? I think it meets the podcast theme pretty well, and I haven't been able to find any narrators of your caliber who have done it yet. Wow. Well, thank you very much. I am so glad you're enjoying the podcast. I have heard of The King in Yellow. I know that that book is about a play that causes people to go insane after reading it. There's also a movie, In the Mouth of Madness, which is very similar. And The King in Yellow inspired other writers like H.P. Lovecraft to start diving into the weird cosmic horror. So I can definitely look into doing that for an episode. I don't know how soon it'll be, but thank you so much for the request. Now, let's talk about The City in the Sea. Originally, this poem was published as The Doomed City in 1831, when Poe would have been only 22 years old, right around the time that he was court-martialed and dismissed for neglecting his military duties and disobeying orders. Later, the poem was changed to The City of Sin, but since 1845, it has been known as The City in the Sea. Kind of gives it more finality, as the city is swallowed by the sea. Now, in this story, there is a city in the dim west that is ruled by death. Death is like their god. And it's fitting that it's in the west because the sun sets in the west. It's symbolic of this place having reached its end. And by the end of the poem, hell comes forth from the sea to swallow up the city that death has provided and holds it in reverence, which means this city was so evil that even hell was like, yeah, okay, that's enough. You're done. You've done enough. Good job. This story certainly draws on some biblical references. Poe is known for doing that a lot in his work. And it could very well be that what Poe is describing here is one of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Although what's interesting from an artistic point is that Poe never mentions people living in the city, or has any talk of what is actually happening in the city that makes it so evil. But the towers and spires are time-eaten, which means this place is old. So maybe nothing is happening right now, but what were the things that happened there ever so long ago before death came to rule? And were they so evil that the place itself is now a memory of that pure evil? Considering Poe would have been 22 when this poem was first published, I think we can also see some examples of a young man figuring out his own writing style. There's something called anaphora, at least I think it's pronounced that way, which means that you intentionally repeat a certain section of what you're writing or saying in order to add emphasis. So an easy example would be, you better watch out, you better not cry, you better not pout. That's anaphora. And Poe is experimenting with this poetic tool in this poem, which he uses in later writings. Hence the repetition of, quoth the raven, nevermore. I should honestly redo that poem. I am thinking about, let me know if you guys like this idea, but I have improved my equipment and gotten better at editing audio since I first started this podcast, and I'd like to actually redo some of the old episodes, not take down the old episodes because I like, seeing the progression of where I came from, but just revisiting certain stories or poems and doing them again. So if you like that, then let me know in the comments of the Poe Show YouTube channel, or message the podcast through the email, or sending an anonymous text message. Now, the city is swallowed up by the sea, and water, in almost any literary sense, is symbolic for a few things. Whenever there's a symbol in literature, very rarely does it mean one thing. Like, if it means one thing, then it's usually an allegory. It's saying, this is exactly what that means. But with symbolism in general, it can mean many things at one time. But for many instances, water is symbolic for characters going through a baptism and becoming clean. But water also has great destructive powers. It can create mud, it can muddy things up, it can create whirlpools, tidal waves, tsunamis, and floods. Now, this poem seems to mimic the themes of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood, and the sea coming to swallow up all the evil and take it away from this world. But there's no rainbow at the end of this story. See, the rainbow at the end of Noah's story was the symbol of God's promise that no matter how much he grew to hate humanity for their wickedness, he would never try to wipe us all out again. But the only God in this poem is death, and the only promise is oblivion. Now, this next part is just a theory. It's my own theory. But I think that Poe might have been writing this poem as an allegory for his time spent at West Point. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Edgar Allan Poe did serve in the military, and he had been serving and actually flourishing for about 2 years. And he rose to be a sergeant major for artillery, transferred a couple of times, and had a good career. But at West Point, the pressure got so intense that he would write poetry insulting his superior officers and hand it out during different classes and with his friends. And it eventually got so bad that he quit. I think it's probable that Poe was actually writing about West Point when writing The City in the Sea, and how he hoped it would just be swallowed up by the sea because he hated it so much. That's about it for the aftertalk that I've got for this episode, because I just recently moved to a new place, so I am still getting settled, but you can expect regular episodes uploaded at regular times, the 7th and 21st of each month. And hey, if you guys want more episodes, let me know. You know, if you would listen to 3 or 4 episodes in a month, then let me know. Email the Poe Show, or send an anonymous text message, or leave a comment on YouTube, because I can do more. I can do more classic ghost stories. I can do more, I can feature more fairy tales. I can feature more poetry. Let me know, because I am totally willing to do that. Thank you so much for joining me here today on The Poe Show. Remember to like and subscribe for more content. Give this podcast a good rating, because that helps immensely with exposing it to more people. Leave a comment on The Poe Show YouTube channel. Send a message using the link in the description to the podcast, or you can email poeshowpod@gmail.com. The Poe Show is also on Instagram at The Poe Show Podcast and TikTok at Poe Show Podcast, and you can follow on there to get updates about new episodes. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you again on the next episode of The Poe Show.